All right. Thanks for joining me, guys. Episode 6 of the Rooster's Crow podcast. I had the pleasure of speaking with Derek Fiedler. Derek Fiedler is a friend. He is a YouTube content creator. He is a contributor to the Symbolic World blog. Excellent article he just wrote about the Matthew McConaughey and the burning bush. I believe it's entitled The Symbolism of the Burning Bush, a response to Matthew McConaughey. Found it very interesting, and I'm going to link it here to the description here in in this video. And took a little bit of different tact this with Derek here. He is the first person I had a conversation with online, and I think I was his as well. So we kind of go way back, and I value his friendship very much. And so he took the tact of kind of just talking heart to heart and seeing if dialogos emerges. And the first part of our conversation, we kind of just had our natural reaction to week 1 of 2021 and all of the fun and games that entailed. We talked about kind of the situational assessment of social media and how our different people are reacting and leaving different social media platforms, creating others, what that means. And we talked about our own struggles with social media and kind of how to navigate that. We talked about propaganda and technology and how to reverse engineer propaganda in order for it to cause cohesion instead of disintegration. We talked about politics, education, and then we really got into parenting and how to bring the new, how to help create the new, and how to help to create new order in the world and all these different areas that seem to be dissolving in front of us. Had a really great conversation, and I hope you guys like it. So I bring to you here Derek Fiedler. Love to hear your feedback. Thanks so much. All right, Derek Fiedler, thank you for joining me. How are you?
It's an absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for having me, James.
Yeah, man. I enjoyed talking to you. You are actually maybe one of the first, or the first person that I spoke with online and did again a YouTube discussion with, kind of ever. So it's really cool to catch up with you again and see how things were going.
Yeah, indeed. You're my first full conversation that I posted on my YouTube channel. And, it was a really special conversation and people really received it well.
Yeah.
I remember we talked about the understanding Christ as the eternal Tao, or the eternal Logos. And at the time you were reading a book by that title. And since then, man, it's just been awesome to see your channel grow and to see the people you're talking to and the people that you're reaching.
Yeah, likewise, man. I appreciated that talk, and it seems so long ago, but it was this last year. It was not even a year.
Yeah, less than a year ago.
It just seems like so much has happened. That was before. No, it was COVID. COVID had just started. No, I think it was about a month or two in, and it was before my son was born, and I was really concerned about that. Navigating the hospital. And now you've had a baby boy born as well, so we both brought a couple of baby boys into the world in the middle of chaos. We dropped hopefully an anchor of love and peace into the world and not more chaos. So hopefully, right?
Yeah, I think it's one of the best contributions that I made all year.
Yeah, likewise.
Was the arrival of our son.
Yeah, likewise. It was not to do a year in review, but it was just a whirlwind. Well, obviously because of COVID and all that happened, but so many things happened to people around me and people that I love and care about. Just amazing amounts of chaos. Like, I had one of my best friends had, a death in the family, lost her sister, and a month later lost her dad. And the next day lost her sister on her dad on a Sunday, lost her brother on a Monday, literally lost the whole family outside of COVID. Wow. And to process that, it's like, my goodness, there's a lot of stuff you hear and you've been seeing. What do you think's going on? Like with all of this, it's one thing to see, the coronavirus hit and then the measures and the outcome from that, but it seems like there's more happening. What do you think's kind of going on here as we start in 2020, 21?
It kind of reminds me of maybe like a skit that we've all seen where you think someone is who they are, and then they take off a mask,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, oh my goodness, you're this totally other person. I had no idea. I didn't see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly thereafter, they take a mask and they're back to the person that you originally thought they were.
Yeah.
And then like you just keep doing this over and over again. And you eventually what happens and you lose track and you're so uncertain of who people are and what side they're on and what identity they have. That's how I feel right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if how to interpret it other than maybe symbolically at this point. I'm not a person that's well astute in politics or anything like that. I take more so of the philosophical lens, trying to dig down to the foundation of things. So maybe we could move forward with trying to sort out the state of the world through that lens.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk about here is just maybe we can both react to to the first week of 2021, and just to kind of speak to your kind of idea of this mask coming on and off. I feel the same way, and it seems like every issue, major or minor, the outcome is more ambiguity. Like whatever it
Mm,
is, whether is Trump a Russian agent or not, was there massive election fraud or not? Does hydrochloroquine work or not? Are masks necessary or not? It's like if it was either or, it would be less chaotic. But everything has this kind of cloud of uncertainty around it. And if you look at literally every issue that's popped up, and this what happened this last week at the Capitol, boom, right? Was it Antifa planned? Was it actual Trump supporters that have lost that lost their cool? And was it because Trump agitated them? Was this another psychological operation meant to increase the chaos that we see coming through our screens? And the outcome or the effect is this dizziness. And I think we're going to get more of that. And maybe we can talk about what we can do to stay afloat when this happens. That's what made me think of when you talked about this mask coming on and off. It brought up this. It's a good expression of exactly how I feel as well.
yeah, dizziness.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like if we were to take example, in the event that someone didn't see any of the proceedings that happened the last few days, the Capitol building was infiltrated by some individuals, most notably one that was wearing what looked to be like a buffalo helmet or some type of horned mask. He had face paint, he was shirtless, and there's an image of him that is of him standing in the very place that all of the lawmakers, the lawgivers and interpreters and all of that, our legislature were just in there convening, talking about how to bring law and order to our country. That room was empty and he stood alone with his bare chest puffed out, holding a flag, horned helmet, a very beast-like type of image. And I suppose two things. So to the point of this, dizziness, my experience of that is the first news that hit me was that this was an Antifa posing as a Trumper or a supporter of Trump who was trying to stir up chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I posted that on my Facebook and then I got like a ridiculous amount of people chiming in either way. And then what came to me was that no, in fact, he's been a long time QAnon or alt-right member. And so he's actually a supporter of Trump all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other ones that came like same facts, right? Same images, same guy with the horned helmet. And then it's like, well, maybe he was a double agent that was paid off shortly before, like say he got $1 million by whoever, elite in the back, that's pulling all the strings, and they flipped him right at the last moment to try to cause all this chaos and make Trump look a certain way. And so like propaganda is just flying all over the place, is coming from all angles.
Yeah.
That made me dizzy.
Yeah. 100%. And that's like we get bam hit with this. We're looking to start a new year and to start clear and clean, and boom, you get hit with this main event here. And the reaction, my kind of go-to reaction is that this was some sort of manufactured media event that has certain purposes, because how, and I'm not sure that this is the case, obviously, just kind of talking out loud, how would they allow in the most heavily fortified city in a time when there's mass protests that they will allow a person to get and breach the perimeter and then get inside and then have that photo op? And the photo op is not like a CCT camera. It's like, there were journalists in there doing, high definition pictures of this complete maniac. And there was I don't know if you saw an interview with the Viking guy before. He was talking, it was that day, I think. And he was saying that, I can see into higher dimensions. I see what the pedophiles are up to because my third eye is open, and kept going on with this crazy stuff. And, he's the one who's pictured right there and right where the laws are made. And it was just it was a bizarre event. And then the reaction that we've seen just in the last couple of days where, Twitter and Facebook have removed thousands, tens of thousands of accounts, removed Trump's account. I think Nick Fuentes, who I don't really follow, he was kicked off of D Live, I believe it is, which I don't follow as well, but it was more of an alt tech type of platform. And it seems like it's being used as a pretext for almost like a Patriot Act 2.0 that they are going to unleash on us. And they already are with regards to talking about, getting some legislation in place to address this main event here. But at the same time, when you have this argument, I talk to my friends on the left, and, I don't consider myself on the right or the left. I have been kind of left leaning, most of my life, but that last 4 years, it seems like they've gone insane. Like, and it's crazy. So I say, like,
well, I can share that I'm a similar vantage point or state of position as well. Kind of,
yeah.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that. I don't know, man.
Yeah. Which doesn't, it's strange because when I was having the conversation with friends, like, we saw what happened with Antifa and across the country for, months straight, massive destruction, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of destruction, the attack on federal buildings day in and day out. And the reaction that we saw from that versus the reaction from this one event, I condemn all type of violence like that, right? But the difference in reaction between the media and people is astonishing.
It was a direct flip on both sides.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at the left, where if you just take clippings from any one of the news headlines from what was happening with the riots, the looting, the destruction of public property, of private property, murders happening, taking over city blocks in Seattle and Portland and other cities around the US. If you just look at the headlines, like the keywords would be protest and peace and demonstrations, despite the fact that there was murders happening. And then the conservative side, the right, would say, oh man, this is crazy. This is riots and loots, and this is like an embarrassment to our whole country. Fast forward to what happened the last couple of days, and you still see these same arguments. It's just the sides have flipped and the tables have turned. And so now you have all of a sudden these headlines that we would have expected CNN to be saying 6 months ago. Now they're saying, like, this is violent rioting, it's an embarrassment to our whole country, and et cetera. And then the conservatives now are at the point where it's like, are you defending this? But then, I mean, it gets really deep into it because we're not quite sure the individuals that made it into the Capitol building, what side they were really on, like where they were at psychologically and their psychological health. I actually have friends that came from a little town in Northern California, and they went over to DC around this time and wanted to be a part of the events that were happening. And the reports that they said was like, it was pretty mellow for most of the time. Like most of the time, it was just people wanted to have a presence and demonstrate their views or try to make a point just by protest. And they said it was peaceful. There was dialogues happening, like stuff that you would not hear in the mainstream media. So if I can, I'd like to back up to what you said about there being these facts and then having this narrative that's being framed, and then the two sides. So I heard Mitch McConnell say that there was in his address to what's happening, and him saying that we need peace, we need unity, we can't be divided, and we can't. And I really agreed with all of what he was saying. But then he said, like, we can't be a country that has two different parties with two different sets of facts, with two different missions. We can't be divided. But the thing that I disagree with what he said is, it's not that we have two different sets of facts. The really concerning thing is that we have the same facts. And here's a small example. There's footage of the barriers that were holding back the protesters near the Capitol building. The narrative says that they stormed the Capitol, but then the footage that we see is actually the local police opening the gate and then the protesters proceeding. Those are the facts. There was protesters, there was a gate, the local police, which it's really confusing to me why the Capitol building wasn't being guarded by like the National Guard or a little bit more, a stronger arm of our federal military, let's say, or of security. Regardless, the gate was opened by the local police, and then the protesters walked forward from there.
Yeah.
So both sides have the same set of facts. The stories that were shared with me from one side said, this just shows that the local police were in on it. They were on the Trump supporters' side, and they allowed them to advance, and they were part of this horrible event to storm the Capitol and bring harm to everybody. Okay, turn the page. I also received word from the same set of facts that said, oh, don't you see, it's the left or whoever is like pulling the strings of the left that want to stir chaos. And so they ordered the police to open the gate to allow the people to come forward, and the Antifa infiltrators posing as Trumpers would cause havoc and just destroy things and lead to people getting killed and all of that. It's a matter of frames. It's not a matter of having separate facts. That's what really concerns me, is to the point where we can look at the same thing. It's a really simple, like 20-second clip, but the frame of our narrative are coming from totally different angles, that their logi or their ordering principle of how they derive meaning is rearranging those facts according to a totally different ordering principle, a different narrative.
Yeah. It's a messy situation. And I like how you brought up the kind of the work of the logos, which is being purposefully obfuscated. And not only do we have different frames, those of us that are in more tuned to new media, social media and YouTube and things of that nature, but then you have a large faction of the population that only watches CNN, right? CNN versus Fox. And on CNN versus Fox, you won't even see the gate kind of being open. That's more something that you'll see from someone sharing on social media, right? When a lot of people aren't even on social media. And then how can you trust that the video that came through that showed the gate being open is in the appropriate context of that's what happened? Right. So there's so much, there's nested.
That could have been a separate event 2 years ago, for all I know. I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or it could have been so there, and it's nested levels of chaos and ambiguity. And I think the idea, or the question that I ask myself is what to do when the information landscape and the channels of communication are so polluted that we can't trust any information that comes through the screens that we've surrounded ourselves with. And people have strong intuitions, whether it's Trump is X or the left is X. And the problem is your intuition pump is being primed by a completely polluted information landscape. So you have to you have to go against and think, oh, my intuition is not based on like, general intuition is not based on appropriate data. So I have to step back. And I think the best thing to do the best thing to do would be not to tune in. I think second best is not to react in any, like, don't come up with a narrative yourself, and just observe if possible. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the most important classes that I ever took, and I postponed it to like the very last moment, was a 1-unit class at my junior college called Information Literacy.
Mm-hmm.
It was taught by the librarians inside the library, and it was all about how to filter information and decide if it's credible or if it's fake or if it's, propaganda. And I had wished that I had taken that class much sooner. And I can see just how important that class and why it was required, because it takes skills to be able to filter something. It takes skills to understand how propaganda works.
Mm-hmm.
It takes skill to understand how to frame narratives and to reorder facts according to how you want the story to be told. So that's on us.
Mm-hmm.
That's, like we were talking about earlier, you're a father, I'm a father. That's on us to teach our kids how to be able to exercise those skills and to not be fooled. You got to teach them wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I think it's a mixed bag when we talk about the media outlets, or let's say social media, because a big one right now is Twitter and Facebook, and that they silenced the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. And then that just seemed to be the first step, or the breaking the seal, because then they started silencing people that had any association or support of him, mm-hmm. and were promulgating the information. And I think that's a slippery slope to freedom of speech and being able to silence people and bully people into only talking in the way that a particular private corporation wants them to talk. I look at Facebook though, but it's a mixed bag, because you and I met through Facebook. And I really consider our friendship to be valuable, mm-hmm. in many ways. I think of all of the people that I've met directly through Facebook. I think of the conversations that we've had. I mean, the Symbolic World discussion group, I've learned countless amounts of lessons because of the things that people shared in that group. And that's just one example. Mm-hmm. I think of the items I bought through Marketplace and the friends that I reconnected with after years. So there's a lot of positives, but then we got to weigh those out too, with the fact that I don't have an open, clear conscience whenever I go to post things on Facebook anymore, or post a video on YouTube anymore, right? There's this thing in the back of my mind that thinks, oh, whoa, they might demonetize you. They might put you on timeout for like a few weeks because you're not behaving properly. And it's like, I don't want to live in that world. That's the world that I read about when I pick up the Gulag Archipelago, mm-hmm. and how Solzhenitsyn was warning us. Like, these are not even the baby steps, man. These are the steps midway down the road that you don't want to go to, because then it leads to a whole citizenry that doesn't trust anyone, mm-hmm. and they can't trust each other to actually speak truth without having it be silenced, or the consequences become more and more extreme.
Yeah. It's Solzhenitsyn is he is key in how to navigate these waters. And I haven't read him enough, but what I have read, and he really talked about how to manage and how to cope and how to, thrive even in these highly disassociated and polluted information landscapes where propaganda is the status quo, or propaganda isn't something that is other than the information that we're getting. Propaganda is the information that we're getting. So how do you navigate that? And that's something that I've been thinking about. Like, I see a lot of my friends and people that I love and trust are just getting off Facebook left and right. And I don't have that intuition. I have this, like, I don't engage politically really at all with Facebook, and I really value our relationship, and so many that I've met on different Facebook groups, which I really appreciate, that I don't know I don't feel the need to leave it. And like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I want to continue what I'm interested in Facebook. And I don't just generally talk about things that, you know, I see the problem is real, and the solution isn't clear, but I don't see leaving that platform as an answer. Like, you know, see what's happened with the mass exodus after the election and everybody got on the Parler, but that just creates an echo chamber. Like, you know, everybody on Parler feels and thinks the same way. And then, so I don't think engaging, I don't know how Twitter and Facebook have become reality. Like when we say, you know, the president, and I have this intuition too, the president was censored off Twitter. I think that's a part, and I think it's a slippery slope. But why are we just automatically thinking that these platforms are reality now? Because journalists made it that way. You know, it's like, it's not like my wife, we were talking about this earlier, and people that aren't on Twitter at all, and I'm not on Twitter really at all, just a little bit, but I've never been able to kind of catch a rhythm on that platform. When you tell them that, you know, the president was kicked off Twitter, and people that aren't on Twitter are like, so what? Like, you know, what does that matter? Or that they're censoring on these different platforms. People that aren't involved in it at all are just going about their lives, you know, taking care of their kids, doing their job and whatnot. And they're not subject to this madness that we are subject to. And they don't get the dizziness that we get, you know? So it's this balancing the line. You can't put your head in the sand, but you can't put your head in the blender either. So it's like, what is that fine line?
Yes,
you know,
right.
It's
yeah, no, I think, yeah, I feel like I have maybe a foot in both of those tensions. Because I've thought about that, where, I mean, there's other things with Facebook that deeply have been troubling me for the last year, primarily around their privacy policies and the fact that they use our messenger as a way of gathering data of how to sell us stuff. Like, I hate ads.
me too.
I hate them. And so that has just become more invasive as time has gone on. And then with YouTube, it really turned me off whenever it took away that opt-out policy for monetization. So my channel, I've never intended for it to have commercials, especially in the early days. Like, it's a new channel doesn't have 1 million subscribers, you know? So whenever they allowed that, I thought that was great in the beginning, but then they changed it this year. And now, so not only are you too small to qualify to get a kickback from their ads, now they're going to play the ads anyway, and you still don't get a kickback from it because you're not big enough. So it's like they maintain their hierarchy of inequality, right? Where the people at the top of the hierarchy, the select few, get all the perks and all the features. Then the people at the bottom, they don't have that opt-out option anymore. So people are viewing ads that, who knows, it could be an ad that really harms them and causes them to falter, or maybe it catches them in a point of weakness. And I hate that. I hate thinking about that, because I care about my subscribers and their spiritual health, their, you know, as well as their cognitive health. So those type of things have already been kind of like brewing within me. But then now it turns me off, the fact that they could just think that they can silence people willy-nilly based on their personal way of seeing the world. The cool thing about the United States is that we have the freedom to choose, and we could choose to be a part of that, and we could choose to be a part of platforms that we align with principally, or we could choose to stick it out because, you know, we outweighed the pros and the cons. I haven't made the jump to Parler or MeWe or any of these other alternatives just yet, but I do think my days on Facebook are numbered. I think it's the cons have finally just tipped over the edge, and I can't be a part of it anymore. I'm not sure if I'll even continue on social media at this point. Like, I'm weighing a lot of things out. So maybe next time we talk, we'll have some of these things more secured.
Yeah. Or more messy, you know?
Or it might be messier. I don't know. No, yeah. I think that's a good goal for us, is to like clean up, man. I know there's swamps everywhere, but we really got to keep forging through and making a case for order and for principles and for how we really want to see this country be built upon. Like, we want to establish and identify these pillars and move forward. Like, at the end of the last year, through Facebook, I received an ad. I'm so hypocritical. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. I received an ad that was actually quite beneficial in the long run from Hillsdale College. They offer quite a robust offering of online courses, one of which is the Introduction to Western Philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So I posted to the groups and on my page that I was going to be committing to a 14 session online course to learn about Western philosophy, because I never did. 30 years in the country, never learned about our philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with getting several degrees along the way too.
Mm-hmm.
So people responded positively. There was a group of about 10 people that all wanted to do it together. We hopped on board to a Discord server, and away we went. We get together once a week, we discuss it, and so far, between 7 and 10 people are all learning about Western philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Super positive experience, educational, beneficial for me. It was because of a Facebook ad
Mm-hmm.
that all of that came about.
And there's the ambiguity again, right?
Yeah.
Just sits right
Yes.
in there. I have the same intuition where I can't stand commercials at all. And I don't have commercials on YouTube. You pay for I think it was a couple bucks now. When I watch YouTube, I don't see commercials.
Yeah, YouTube Premium, same here.
Yeah, and I can't stand them. Like I have YouTube TV. We don't have cable, and commercials will come on, and my son even closes his ears, goes la 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 la, like don't watch the commercials. I tell him don't watch them. But if this system was optimized, like to really put into your awareness stuff that you're interested in, like it's the algorithms that are optimized and biased towards interest. It used to be better. Now you get a Facebook ad and it's like it's mostly junk, but sometimes you'll find something good, and it's about navigating that ability to disregard without getting emotionally hijacked. Like my wife sees it, like I'll see a commercial and I'm like, especially on TV where you see the commercials for all these different pills, like for antidepressant. There's this antidepressant that you take because your antidepressant isn't working. And I have no problem with people having depression and taking care of that in any way that they need to. But to have these commercials inundating you about prescription, those are my biggest bane is prescription pill commercials. Yeah. And Coca-Cola commercials. Like, why would you need to have a Coca-Cola commercial? Do people not know about it? Like, what's the point of that? It's because they're priming us. They're conditioning our consciousness, and that's the problem. And I think you've tapped on to one of the root causes. I think is this kind of commercial advertising. It's infiltrated all levels of our lives, and it's terrible. So I'm with you, But then again, you find something that's meaningful. So how do you navigate the waters? You could leave the platform, leave all the other platforms. I mean, they're going to get polluted too. I mean, that's just the way that the nature of the beast, and it goes down to
any organization grows in complexity over time. I mean, look at our country. Like we're not going to have less laws as we move forward.
Yeah,
we're just going to make more.
Yeah.
So like the idea is that you have a frame that has some fluidity to it. That's why okay, so have you ever thought about how odd it is that taboos are now taboo, or the very act of tabooing or shaming, social shaming is now a shame, or it's taboo to do that. Okay, so I put a little bit of thought to this, and what's the alternative? If we don't have a way of shaming people to say, that's morally reprehensible, we don't want that, that's not okay. Then if we take that away from telling someone that and somehow shaming them or making it a taboo ritualistically, the alternative usually comes in the form of a top-down rule or a law, policy. And so then more and more and more and more policy happens. Like, do we want to live in a world like that where it's completely rule based? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure if a society that is so heavy on taboos is where we want to be, but I'm starting to see that there's a positive side to having that social dynamic rather than merely a political one.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And it depends where you're coming from. Like what we've seen in the last couple of years, that song, Baby It's Cold Outside, was removed from radio play last year or the year before. And because it supported rape culture, they said, the song, Baby It's Cold Outside. And it talks about, and the song is about,
Yeah, right.
and a guy's trying to get his girl to stay, and she's like, no, I gotta go, baby, it's cold outside. And they said that this song, this Christmas song that's been around for so long, is now no longer appropriate. At the same time, the number one song a few months ago was WAP, which means what ass P, right? And it was geared towards girls, little girls, young girls. So on the one end, they're saying we have to do away with something like Baby It's Cold Outside, but we're celebrating an absolute horrific thing to do, which is show and gauge this type of material to kids. But we have a certain moral stance and a certain perspective. In this sense, it's more traditional. But people will look at that and say, well, that is not my stance. And I think that, I'm for the exact opposite that you're for. Why is your moral stance more true than mine? And this is, I think, a consequence of postmodernity and where we're at in that sense. Mm-hmm. So how would you answer that? Like, why was your perspective on what's taboo or what's right or wrong? Why is that one the correct one?
It certainly undercuts the whole idea of having moral relativism. Mm-hmm. Like if you read C.S. Lewis, any one of his essay nonfiction publications, usually has somewhere in there where he makes the case for moral judgments, and that there's actually a hierarchy of morality where it starts just like that. I think that there's a way of communicating morals that are better than other morals or other ways of communicating. You just created something that's better than the other. That's a hierarchy, right? And then if you keep going up that hierarchy, there's going to be the best morals, mm-hmm. truth. There's going to be a truth that is better or best than anything else that's better. I don't think they realize that they're making that argument or acting it out whenever they say things like, we're going to silence Trump because we're against all of these other things, right? They're anything but a moral relativist.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's strange that and I agree. And I think this is something that is emerging, is that there is something that is called truth. There is the right way to be in the world, right? And it's not right in terms of politically better, in terms of that if you live a certain way and you have certain behaviors, that your relationships will thrive and your family will thrive, your community will thrive. But with the inability to share this information and discuss what that would look like because of the polluted information landscape, it's like it makes an argument for, like you're saying, leaving the platforms that you don't agree with morally and building new ones and building community outside of those behemoths that don't match.
Yeah, I mean that's what we do. That should be our culture. Is like, you know what? I'm not happy with company X. So someone gets smart and they say, there's a lot of people that aren't happy with company X. So I'm going to start company Y, and I'm going to listen to them, and I'm going to make it to where it serves their needs. So it's a win-win. They pay for the service, they pay for that investment, for that risk. And then, it's mutual. It's a mutually benefiting process. And that's what we're seeing is it should play out like that. We shouldn't have to like slap Facebook on the wrist and say, behave a certain way because so many people are on your platform. It's like, I'm not even for that. I don't think okay. I think it's important that they do have some accountability to Congress, right? And that we should have laws in place digitally because of how influential that realm is to or spatiotemporal one, it's reality. But I don't think that it should be the be all end all. It kind of gets back to like the taboo versus the making policy or just having different alternatives. Like we have the freedom to choose, and there's some alternatives that are coming out. So make your choice, like do it with your conscience, write out, a 2-column page and say pro and con and write it out. But I think the bigger thing, James, is what you talked about with family and kids. Like whether you're a parent or not, there comes a point in maturity where you start seeing things differently, and you look at the world as a way that you're building it for the next generation. I think Peterson really aroused a lot of those paternal or intergenerational passing of the baton, so to speak, where, we got to build the city that we want our kids to rule. And I mean that in the most positive term, to rule the city and make it the most habitable, peaceful, life-giving place possible. That's on us. Like we need to do the best job we can to the extent of our influence. And of course that pattern, that it's nested within larger patterns too. Like we want to build the country that we want our pillars of philosophy to be true, right? That's why we read the Declaration of Independence. That is a philosophical document. We hold these truths to be self-evident. The self-evident is a philosophical term made most popular by Plato and Aristotle. And we think it just means obvious. But self-evidence is a truth that is so fundamental that you can't prove it with, say like a logical argument, if that makes sense. It's one of the things I'm learning in my Western philosophy course. But back to parenthood, what it's done for me is really aroused that in me, where I look at parenthood as one of the most important crafts that I have, similar to crafting a YouTube video or crafting an article that I write, crafting a painting, right? Crafting a house to build. Parenting is an exciting craft for me. I want to get better and better and better at it, because I think it's one of the most important things that I could possibly do to make sure that the world is a better place. Like beyond all of the artistic and written work that I do or video, anything like that, like I see parenting as probably the most effective thing that I could do to help turn the course at this point.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And it's, the question is, and I think there's progress happening on that front with regards to families and how to treat children and how to, grow human beings into, human beings that have integrity. Right. And I think we're all wrestling with that. And it's a good thing to wrestle with that and how to kind of go about that. And I think, there's this, I think it's from the Bible, it says, listen to the babes, and Christ was really about the children, right? Because they have the new consciousness. They are essentially bringing in the new. And we have had this way of conditioning the new out of them and getting them locked down into the old ways of thinking and being. And the question is, how do you do that? And my kids are, and I've seen kids, they're intuitively not interested in something like the news or, and I don't mean just because it's boring and whatnot. I see my kids when I start talking politically with a neighbor or we start watching, any type of news, they will try to get us off of it. They'll try to get us to stop talking about that type of stuff. Cause it's like, and I'll tell them, I'm like, this is meaningless for you guys. Like, don't worry about this. This is like kind of navel gazing or whatnot. Like we have to open up a space for them to bring in the new. And we're in this transition space now between, the old way of, the old media landscape and the new media landscape, which is, which has effects ripple effects through the real world that we're seeing here now. So it's this same way of cultivating courage in your child, not keeping them sheltered, but also being careful of exactly what they are being exposed to. And that's difficult because it's your kids on social media a lot. Social media gives you just obviously I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. They're not on social media in terms of, and they won't be until, after college, if anything. But they do watch YouTube Kids. They watch a lot of educational stuff, which now has been infiltrated by commercials too, which wasn't the case before, which is pretty terrible. But they're going to be dealing with the same world that we are. So they have to be exposed to what the reality is, but they also have to be cultivated in a certain way to have them kind of overcome the shortcomings that we have. And it's a challenge,
Yeah. I mean, the number one genres in YouTube right now is, was it gaming and kids content under the age of 13. So it's huge. Yeah. So I think the other day, was it 3 days ago, whenever all of this was happening, if you were to start one of the read the Bible in a year or read the New Testament in a year plans, it fell on Matthew 6, which is the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, which is chapters 5-7 in the Gospel of Matthew. And the Sermon on the Mount was, I mean, it's the undisputed foundational text for any of the nonviolent civil disobedient movements in the civil rights 60s era, as well as Gandhi. And that's the one that says, whenever someone strikes you, don't hit them back, turn the other cheek, right? Whenever someone tries to spitefully use you, you pray for them. Whenever you love your enemies, you pray for good for those that spitefully use you and pray for those that persecute you. So it's that passage of scripture. My family, my wife and my 2 children and I were all gathered around in the morning, and we're going through this text, and it was just a sweet moment because my 3-year-old daughter, Abigail, she asked me, she's like, well, what does that mean? What's that? And she's kind of was a little bit disengaged at that point. And so I can't tell you what a joy it was and what a challenging exercise it is to try to explain the Sermon on the Mount, specifically on loving your enemies, to a 3-year-old. But in the end, I rose to the challenge and I did an okay job. And she seemed to express that she understood it. And something clicked in me where it's like, this is what it's all about, right? We can't always spend all of this time, in the deepest, highest level of intellectual, academic, theological language. We also have to be able to explain it to where the simplest or the youngest can understand it as well. But what I was really doing is I was training her how to see, right? In that passage, it's also Matthew 6:22 has one that says, let your eye be single and full of light, right? And it's talking about perspective. And if your eye is not, then it's full of darkness. And how great is that darkness? And I think one of the things that is on my list of 2021 topics to be more acquainted with and to do a better job at is propaganda. And that's something that I really want to be able to train my kids to see, to be able to say, or to be able to see how propaganda is working and recognize it for what it is, but then also to understand how to do it properly in a way that honors people instead of tries to exploit them. So for example, you can cut in at any point, but so for example, there is we're part of this book reading grant that we receive 1 book a month for our child Abigail. We've been receiving it for the last 3 years, ever since she was born. So we get we don't select it. It's we just get it in the mail once a month. And so far I'd have to say that 80% of them have ended up in the trash because either the story sucked and it wasn't actually telling a story, or it was just the amount of political propaganda was just baked into it to where I just didn't want my child to be exposed to it at such a young age. However, there are some examples of good ones. So I'll give you 2. One is about Kitty's Special Job. Are you familiar with that book? Okay, so Kitty's Special Job is all about a kitty who is a part of a bunch of animals on a farm. And the rooster crows to get all of the animals up and working and doing their jobs for the day to help out for the good of the farm. Kitty, meanwhile, is sleeping in. And so the rooster, after it's crowed, comes to the sleeping lazy cat and says, "Kitty, what are you doing?" And the kitty says, "Oh, why do you have to wake us so early?" Didn't really care for the rooster's crow, pun intended. And the rooster says, "Kitty, what you need is a job." and obviously you can already tell like who's writing this and what propaganda they're trying to sow. And then it goes on in a series of stories of like the dog explains that his special job is to bark and keep intruders away. And so the kitty thinks, "I will do that," tries to bark, and it's funny. She meows, all the other animals laugh at her. And then she tries to be a hen, and then that doesn't work because she can't lay eggs. And you can see that she's trying to find her purpose and her identity in other things. But then she talks with Grandpa Kitty, right? Her father figure, right? And he informs her that she's had a special purpose, a special job this whole time. That she just, it was revealed to her of her special purpose, which was to scare away the mice so that way they didn't eat any of the farmer's grain. And then she found contentment in having not just discovered, but acted out her special job. And then she can sleep in peace in fulfillment of her potential with her grandfather Kitty in the barn. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were already, and I'm describing it in a way you can pick up what the philosophy is behind this story and what type of propaganda that they're trying to sow. And by propaganda, you could think of propagation, like trying to sow seeds, patterns of idea and thought and philosophy in the hopes that they'll germinate and grow into something later on down the road. Okay. Another example is a book, I forget what it's called. It's one of the ones that probably ended up in the trash. And it was all about a young girl who was told by her dad that it's time for bed. And then she proceeds by doing whatever she wants. It's like 20 pages. It's like 80% of the book is one act of disobedience after another. And at the end, instead of being punished or corrected in some way for her disobedience, it's just like this la-di-da, okay, I feel like, going to bed now under my terms. And the dad's like, great, okay, wonderful. And I'm like, yeah, no, my daughter's not reading this. I don't want to sow the seed of disobedience and have that pattern carry out. Like, there's just no way.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, that's I did read a story like that with the bunny that was very similar. That the bunny went and tried to be a bird and tried to hang out with the bear, and each had a problem, and then eventually kind of realized that you are a bunny. You need to be a bunny in a sense. And it's interesting how the roosters crow. The rooster is like this slap in the face to wake you up to your potential and to wake you up to look towards the wisdom holders in your lineage, and maybe consult your grandma or grandpa in order to get an idea of what your purpose is in this world. So it's like this slap, this like flash, hey, get a job, wake up, look inside. And I think we all have those moments.
He literally told her to wake up out of her slumber and to go fulfill her purpose. And she tried to find it in all these other things, but ultimately she found it from this father figure, grandpa.
It's better to search, fail, continue to search, fail, continue to search and fail, and then find your way than to continue to sleep and not fail and just I was just reading.
At least she gave it a shot.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And it's a good story of resilience too.
Yeah. And that's great. I mean, these stories that to build resilience, and you touched upon how propaganda, right? How do you reverse engineer propaganda to have it help build integrity, build courage, and cultivate the right being in the world, right? And I think that's something that I'm very interested in terms of the work of Marshall McLuhan, who I'm actually going to be interviewing Andrew McLuhan, who's his grandson, and he has this, this quip that he put forth was, the medium is the message. What does that mean? It means like the way that the tools that we use to communicate have a bigger impact than the particular communications that come across, right? So it's if you can reorganize the way that you interact and understand and work with the different media that you're surrounded by, right? And use it appropriately. Like you said, you had that Hillsdale College ad that came up and gave you so much great resources, right? How do we do more of that within the continued polluted landscape that's coming about? And that's something that if we can keep talking through that, and I think that's part of the key, because you're not going to get rid of these the way that we are now, and the way that we experience the world. It's both virtual and actual. It's both physical and virtual, and you can't plug out of it totally. I think the only
Yeah, if
way
anything, like the call to parenthood is even that much greater,
yeah,
because it's not just a handful of landscapes to prepare them for. It's like
yeah,
exponentially more
yeah,
digitally, right?
yeah.
But the
So
other thing too, I wanted to mention is that an example of this propaganda is that instead of my daughter going around trying to be la-di-da, which she has a personal temperament to resort, she's like her dad. She's so imaginative. She gets lost in her own little world, playing with Legos or drawing or playing garden outside, that it's hard for her to stay focused and to obey and do what mom and dad are having her do. So the last thing I need is a book that encourages her to do her disobedience. So instead, we keep reading every day. She wants to read this Kitty's Special Job.
mhm.
And so I caught her just the other day saying by herself in her own little world, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then I'm like, Abigail, what are you doing? She's like, my special job. And I'm like, well, what's your special job? She's like, I need to do the dishes. And I have a video clip of the naming of my daughter, and part of that I will show on my YouTube channel, that she's doing the dishes. And it's the cutest thing because she has a little apron. My 3-year-old daughter is like rinsing them off and handing them to mom, and she's getting good at it, man. She's really good. But because of the propaganda of Kitty's Special Job book, she's now acting it out. It's taking fruit in her life. She wants to do her special jobs, her special chores. And it's not this struggle, right? She's not trying to do whatever she wants and then, fight mom and dad. Like, she already at 3, she's expressing fulfillment in her purpose with her jobs to contribute to the greater household.
Yeah. Now that's a beautiful story. And it made me think that, so how can we use the story that didn't resonate with you? Would that be able to resonate with in another situation? Let's say a child comes from a very strict home, or has been adopted, or is in a situation that, that story where, if you didn't do something before, you were either beaten or, verbally abused, right? Where this story in this child's life might be something to help them not get rid of that fear, where, you have too much order, right? If you have too much order, right, then you need a way to tell a story that could maybe ameliorate that. And it made me think of John Vervaeke's term of relevance realization, right? Is cultivating a sense, or cultivating relevance realization is being able to see the propaganda, see the information coming in, and ascertain what is appropriate for that moment for that child in the certain context, right? How do you cultivate that? And I think that comes with, purifying your heart, right? It's not learning stuff. It's continuing to, the more I had this idea that prayer helps cultivate relevance realization. The clearer you get within you, right, the clearer your parenting will be, and the right thing to do in the moment will appear to you, right? And the more and more you work on yourself and on your heart, reading parenting books, of course, and having these conversations, but contexts come at you in so many different ways, whether it's at the supermarket, you're being asked about masks in the supermarket. My child wears a mask every day at school. How do I tell him, not what to think, but, how to engage with this new world that we're living in without, scaring him, in a sense. And I think it happens in the moment, and it's important it makes me think like the media is kind of this, these tools that we have, right? And if we're not aware, if we're not conscious, it will overcome us, right? But if you're conscious and aware, you can take from this media landscape and build a mosaic of right living and teaching that with your children. And I think it's going to come with difficult conversations and difficult decisions to make. Do we leave platforms that we've gotten so much value from the last few years now? Do we modify our behavior or the way we interact on those platforms? And how do we, we have to surf. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. That old quote. Mm-hmm. And I think the kids will learn from you surfing, not from necessarily telling them what to do, but they see you, how you act and interact in the world. And if you're reading them scripture and you're not acting in the way of loving your neighbor, right, and not gossiping and not doing the things, if you can read it to them all day till the cows come home, but it's your behavior, right, that's going to determine what they become, in a sense. So the struggle is a good thing, and letting them see us struggle, you know what I'm saying, with these, mm-hmm. With our own lives, I think is a good thing. And just this part of this conversation, it gives me hope that someone like you and is really, and a lot of people that I've talked to are really focused on parenting correctly. Where before 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was about getting jobs and doing work, and parenting mm-hmm. was kind of secondary. And what we saw in the 20th century with the whole women's movement into the workforce, which was great. Like if a woman wants to be a CEO, she should be allowed to. But the focus got completely away from the family, and we have these skyrocketing divorce rates, and mm-hmm. and our incentive structures have been so disoriented that we have to now look at what are we doing here in the world, what's important, and we have to reorient our incentive structures back towards the family. And I think that's mm-hmm. that's something that's just happening now, which is a good thing. So
yeah, no, I think that a few things that you mentioned is stirring up C.S. Lewis' work, Abolition of Man. Are you familiar with that one?
Mm-mm. Not that one.
Okay.
No.
So it's 3 lectures put into a very small book. You could read it in like an afternoon, especially the first one, Men Without Chess. And he lays out educational propaganda and the problems, the challenges, but then he also lays out some solutions. But that's ultimately his argument, is that he says that instead of trying to just tell us what to do, he's like, no, like that's not a very good educational philosophy, because then once you are removed, then your kids aren't going to know what to do. So you got to make them strong. You got to teach them not just what to think, but how to think. Mm-hmm. But then with propaganda, it's the alarming thing is that when you say the books that I'm reading my child, or the ones that she's going to read in school, or that your child is assigned at school, they have a philosophy baked into it. They have a way of seeing the world, a way of responding to events that take place. And so 20, 25 years from now, maybe, they are asked a question about their opinion on a matter. And suddenly, without thinking through it, they suddenly have a very strong opinion. They know not whence it came or from where it came, but they just know that they have a strong feeling towards it. So that's why it's really important to make sure that the seeds of thought and virtue and principles and perspective are the right seeds that are being sown to the best of your ability. As a parent, you want to filter that. But then the exciting thing about the art of parenting is that you can also shape the way that they can then begin recognizing those patterns in the world around them whenever they're asked those questions or they see those images.
Yeah. Something just dawned on me, kind of bringing it home here, and maybe we can close on this right about the hour mark. We started the conversation talking about the last week that we've seen on social media and what's happened in the last week here politically. But we ended the conversation with a solution, right? With plugging into parenting, like plugging into your local environment being a good father, being a good husband, being a good neighbor, right? Those are the solutions, right? Like we started talking about the matrix. We're plugged in the matrix, talking about what we saw, all these images. We don't know if they're true. None of it is true. What's true is what we ended this conversation with. You know, I feel like we bridge the gap, and I think that is act locally, and be good, be a good human being to people around you, and have your kids observe that and continue to cultivate that. And that is what will emerge, like these seeds that are being planted. The new leaders are emerging, new structures are emerging. We're seeing the dismantling of our institutions, which is alarming, right? From the media and the political sphere, even we can't trust our healthcare institutions anymore. You know, institutions have a lifespan. They grow, they thrive, they become optimized, and then, you know, it's an S curve, and then they die, right? As they die, the new will be built, but it's going to be built. It can't be built on the way things were before. That's why I like Jordan Hall, the game B idea, right? It's not going to be, we're not going to build the same. We're going to build the new. And intuitively, I think the conversation kind of landed here to, you know, how do you build stronger relationships within your family and in your community? I think that's it. We're going to have to act locally. I mean, continue to plug in to social media, but don't take it so seriously. It's not reality. It's just not. We think we think it is. And we're, especially us that are involved a lot in social media and these types of platforms, it's not real. And we have to like realize that, you know, we turn this off, and what do? We go back and, you know, engage with our children and our family and in our relationships, and not bring the disorienting, you know, dizziness that we were talking about. Don't bring that into the house. Don't bring it into your relationships. You're going to have people in your community that you have these conversations with about, oh, can you believe this happened? You know, Trump, he needs to go. He needs to be arrested. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, all that isn't real. Like, but they're making us, they want us to think that's what's real. But, you know, I think we're bridging the gap here, man. So any closing thoughts?
Well, like, yeah, it's funny. As you're wrapping it up, all these thoughts come to mind. But perhaps we could say that for another conversation. But yeah, so like I think our conversation has a good exercise in it that you laid out. You know, like you have the theory, you have the trying to sort things out of what the philosophy is, but then a question that needs to follow shortly after that is like, how do I act it out? How does this change my daily life? Because if it doesn't, then yeah, like how real is it really? Are we just kind of spinning wheels? The thing about social media that saddens me the most is that if you're to look at the post that I made on Facebook, let's say, there's a lot of rich educational content that I shared. Primarily, I mean, like maybe 80–90% of it is, you know, here's an interpretation of a film. Here's a philosopher describing how we should see the world. Here's, you know, scripture here. You know what I mean? Like, here's a conversation that's trying to lay out a good way moving forward for our nation. But then the few times that I've made even an inkling of a controversial topic on politics, those are the ones that get like 100 comments and like 1 billion shares. And it's like, that doesn't sit well with me. Like, I don't like that, because I don't just see users and avatars attacking each other under my thread, under my heading, right? I see my dear friend, Mary, who's a leftist liberal, who I adore because we share permaculture and gardening in common. And I love going to her garden, and I love talking about plants with her. We share seeds almost every year.
Yeah.
Okay, but then I have some family members that are from another part of the country that are diehard Trump supporters. Or I have someone that is an atheist that's a good friend of mine that I care about. And then I have, you know, some, I don't know, evangelical friends from another part of the country or whatever, that, and they're just bashing each other, and I'm seeing the worst brought out of them. That's the part that makes me sad, probably the most, you know, regardless of privacy issues and freedom of speech issues and silencing and censoring. that's the part that hits home for me because it's personal. Because
Mm-hmm.
Mary, she lives down the road from me now, and I don't want some dumb thing that happened really far away that's being discussed, and like, flames and torches are being thrown at each other digitally on a digital platform. I don't want that to hinder us from swapping seeds every year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're talking about how it's spilling into real life, and we can't let it spill into like real life like that. And it's happening at a tremendous rate across the board, and families are fighting. Some, whether you like this hatred of whether you're a Trump fan or not, like it's really affected people in the last few years. But I think what you were talking about, how it didn't sit right with you, was an instance of relevance realization. Like, oh, if I post that, it's the machine trying to bring you in. Oh, you're going to get likes. Like if we talked about
Mm-hmm.
left politics or right, Trump, he needs, like if we did that, we would get so many views on the channel, so many more subscribers. And you got to be careful for that. And I think we're kind of, dancing on that line where you could easily be pulled into that, where it's like, oh, I get more likes, I get more comments, but look at the nature of those comments. It's literally the beast trying to pull you in. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
cultivating relevance realization is, oh, I posted that and that's what happened. I'm not going to do that anymore. I posted this educational stuff and it was edifying. I'm going to do that. And that's what and I share that. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that's what we have to do in terms of the social media landscape, is cultivate relevance realization in this polluted informational landscape, and post and share material that adds to the ordering of the world, that adds to the logos manifesting. How do you know if you're doing that? By, just like you said, the feeling that you get. I got a bunch of views and comments, but it didn't sit right with me. That's not sitting right is the logos saying, oh, don't
Mm-hmm.
share that. And I have the same thing. Like I'll post, I rarely do comment, and I have family members that I'm very fond of, that I grew up with my entire life. I just haven't seen them at all now because of COVID. And one of them is very extremely hatred of Trump and the Republicans, and says like, he should die. He shouldn't be, like, just the craziest thing. When you see him in person, he's not like that at all. But on Facebook, it just brings the worst out of people. And I'll comment, and my comment won't be that bad, but it will be like, I'll post it and I kind of jabbed at him, and I'll post it and I'll be like, ooh, I got this feeling like, it wasn't even that bad, but I just got this feeling, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like, why did I engage in that? So just do less of that, and share more good stuff like your content you're sharing, man. We got to talk again, because I had so much that I wanted to get into here, with your recent post on the Symbolic World blog, and we didn't even talk about symbolism, because of this, this last week. This is a good example of how strongly the pull is to what we see on the screens. And, I guess it's real in some sense, but I think we got somewhere. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think maybe a bullet point list of things for us to look into, and then reconvene and dive into, take a deeper look on, is Francis Lowell is the one that said, think global, act local.
Yeah.
So Francis Lowell is also the one that wrote the Technological Society. And he's a French cultural commentator, thinker, historian. But he also wrote a book called Propaganda. That someone said that I really needed to read. So perhaps you could look into it, and if it catches your fancy, we could read that one, and then kind of circle back on that whole topic of propaganda and family and moving forward there.
Yeah.
But then with symbolism too, man, like I think we'll have to save that one for another day, because I think that image of the horned, shirtless, face painted, barbarian looking beast, it looks like a monster from the margins coming out of hiding and going all the way to the center of the city, the heart of the city, and pushing all of the law and order representatives into hiding. It's like this complete and utter reversal and flip of the symbolism that was happening. And I think, oh gosh, man, like I don't know, man, like that's probably a talk of the day, but I think that's completely significant beyond all of the details of facts that are going to unfold and settle. But just that image is like,
well, there is no law and order. There is no law and order there. Like, that's the Pharisees. They've become corrupt completely compromised at all levels, at all branches. And I don't mean personally the people are bad, that the system selects and cultivates something that's terminal. Like, if we continue like this, maybe we need a shot across the bow like this. Maybe we need to view something like that to show that the emperor doesn't have any clothes. Like, what they're legislating and the laws that they're passing, and especially with the recent coronavirus bill, was something that, I guess we can go for a few more minutes here. Like,
I'm open, man. Let's bring this one out a little bit before we close.
What this coronavirus bill that was supposed to be for relief for people that were affected by coronavirus had all of these different pork and these different items. It was a 5,000 plus page bill that very little of it had to do with coronavirus, and there was a payment and whatnot, which is good. But these bills get passed all the time and nobody cares or says anything. But the environment that we're in now, when things are being revealed, everybody saw that. Both sides, indifferent, saw why would they pass bills like that, right? It's like, it's insane. So all of this stuff and something that I think Trump has done is that he's revealed, he was like a bull in a china shop, man. He's revealed the disingenuous and kind of the worst of the media that I've been studying and thinking about media studies for a long time, and to see somebody say fake news, and no matter what his motives are, which I don't trust his motives, but the fact is that you saw that not only the emperor doesn't have any clothes, across the board, these channels that provide us the information that we get are not trustworthy. And it's a good thing to know that. It's just going to be uncomfortable for a bit,
I mean, when was the last time that people even looked upon the room that Congress convenes to make decisions about policy and law?
They've had
this image, like, suddenly you have like 1 billion people looking at this room and it's a way of shining light. And now all of a sudden all of our attention is directed towards Congress like it has never been in years.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing. Congress has been a single digit approval rating for years, probably 20, 30 plus years, right? Nobody trusts or believes in this system. And, the solution isn't to give our agency to the tech companies that are now there. What governs is, what governs is what makes the decisions, right? And we see what's in power now. It's no longer this way of legislating that it used to be. That's gone. I mean, it just really is. You saw the big tech CEOs come in and be questioned by Congress. It's completely irrelevant. The questions are, there's no, they're in control, right? So we got to be careful here. But I think we're just seeing what has had to happen, and we just got to navigate it appropriately, man.
Yeah. Well, I think having these marginal characters in the center of the city is, I think if it's not, at the very least, it's a wake-up call for everybody, because it's almost similar to how I felt like a call to arms as a parent. We should feel that towards being a citizen, towards being an active citizen, towards being a voting citizen too. It's like, they have that horrible approval rating, but it's like, that's not their fault. It's ours. Like, we're the ones that put them there. Well, presumably.
No, I don't see. I don't vote. Like, I don't give energy to the system, and I don't know this is right or wrong. But I told my son's asking me who I'm voting for, Biden or Trump. I'm not voting for one of them. I just will not do that. And his teacher told him, "Oh, that's not right not to vote." Yeah, because the options that we're given are completely fabricated, and there's no change that's going to happen. Like, so I'm not giving my energy to that system. So I didn't vote the last couple of elections. I think locally it's a little bit more important.
Yeah. What about like your representative or senator?
Yeah, I don't.
Supervisor even.
Yeah, I mean, that's more important, and that gets lost in the fray, right? You don't see, that's not advertised, and that's not a commercial event when local elections happen. Most people don't even know, myself including, who most of their commissioners are, most of the local government. And that's where the at least anything meaningful happens locally, right? The stuff that we see on the television, it rarely really affects our lives. Things have changed now with the coronavirus and whatnot, but I think ultimately it goes back to the concept of think globally and act locally. We have to act locally, and the new is emerging, and it's not going to look like politics. It's not going to look like business as it used to be, right? It's not, our leaders are not going to come from the corporate world or the political world. They're emerging in some new space that I don't think has been articulated yet. And that's something to be hopeful for,
Yeah, quite interesting. I think that there's also a cultural component to what you just described, because if I talk about my grandparents during their time, they had a framed picture of the president in their house. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't have anything like that. Like, no. I think of, so like, there's also like these cultural decisions of like, what's cool, what would be shameful, kind of getting back to those taboos. So not being a participatory citizen I guess has become normalized nowadays, or being disconnected, especially. I think we would have to, in order to repair having citizens that are at least engaged with their attention and their support and their voting, would be to start at the local level. We would have to be starting, even as parents and as teachers, of finding ways not to tell them you need to be more engaged and prepare yourself as a citizen, but to actually take them to a city council meeting, right? Yeah. Whenever the supervisors get together to decide local policy about what businesses come in or how to organize housing and neighborhoods and zoning and all of that, like, yeah, it might be boring, but at least, like you were saying before, like, you're embodying it and you're demonstrating what it looks like to do it, not just to talk about it or post it on some, tweet or whatever. And then perhaps that will recapture this democratic culture of wanting to be engaged in the decision-making process that are the people that are representing us ultimately carry out. But I mean, that's also a leadership issue, man. Like, I just don't trust, like you were saying, like, I look at the leaders and I'm like, that's a suboptimal leader, in my opinion.
The best, like, that's saying it, that's it, putting it in the best light, right? Like, they don't.
Well, I try to do that, man. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to downplay, like, oversimplify it, but I also don't want to add any more fuel to the fire than needs be.
Look what's
especially
happened.
Like I said,
yeah,
politics are a little bit out of my specialty, so I want to be careful with the words I use. But suboptimal decision with leaders. But like, who knows, man? Maybe like some of the recent videos and films that we've come up, like, we might have a wrestler president. Like, someone brought up, are you familiar with Jocko Willink?
Yeah. Yes. Very. Yep.
People want him to be at least a governor, if not president.
I think that.
And I tell you what, as soon as someone said it, I'm like, there was a yes in me, because he embodies leadership like few other people I know.
Yeah, but let's say he becomes president in the same system that we have now, he's going to have to either play ball, or they will uncover stuff that happened or didn't happen in his life, and he will be made out to be whatever they want him to make out to be if he doesn't play ball.
That's true, man.
I think those leaders are coming
beyond reproach.
It's not going to be coming in this system. The system's gone, and I don't mean this in an alarming way. Like, the Constitution, I think, will hold. Right. The Constitution is the DNA, right? But they're coming for it. Like, I think the Constitution, like the DNA of our country, just like the mitochondria, or the center of a cell, is the DNA. Then you have the border, right? The lipid, that's the border. And then you have the different parts of the cell that allow things to come in and out. When a virus comes in and overcomes the cell, it does that when it gets the DNA and replicates itself, right? We have that coming physically in our borders, but we also have it coming in this space where it's attacking and it's trying to do so. But I think,
ideologically and spiritually, your description is very true.
I think the new is emerging, and someone like Jocko Willink, I think I would be happy to have as a leader, but not in any way that we've thought before. Like, I think, what I'm saying? I think what's emerging hasn't been articulated yet. It's in the process of being articulated, of what our leaders are going to look like and what that's going to look like. And it's very exciting, but it's going to look bad. It's going to look alarming, and it's going to look uncertain. Like all this uncertainty, it's just the changeover into the new, right? And it's going to continue like that, but it's ultimately for the best, because if we continue on this road, it's terminal. We'll have no world for our kids. Like look at Flint, Michigan. They still haven't fixed the water there. Like, what is that? What is that? Like, you have poisonous water and it's been a decade and you can't fix that. Like, what is, we have fast food restaurants at every corner. At such our leaders are so compromised at every level. The media is part of it as well. So the new has to emerge, and just to act locally. Like, I just talked with my first graders teacher and asked her for the curriculum, and she sent it to me, and it's changing quickly. But do those things, like get involved at that level, and then
absolutely,
I just did this last week actually, and look at the tests that they're getting. They have this MAP test that they do, which is interesting. And what's happened recently, we won't get into here because I haven't really wrapped my head around it, but be aware and be involved at the local level. And I think we're building, these different networks are building the new, right? And that's what I'm excited about.
Some people forget that when this country started out, we had parties like the Whig Party, long forgotten, right? So it's just like how Amazon CEO said, there's going to be a day where Amazon's not a company anymore. It's gone. And it's so hard for us to imagine in our short term, but it's true. So it's a temporal realm.
America,
and then if you look at it, go ahead.
No, finish your thought there. Yeah.
Well, if just looking at it like perhaps religiously or at least philosophically, where we can talk all day long about Republican and Democrat and Trump and Biden and politics, but at some point we got to talk about the categories that transcend those, which is good and evil. And it's like good and evil could care less what the names are or the forms. They're just mechanisms to get that aim done. And the good, right? It's something that brings us together and unifies and produces life. And then evil is something that would be diabolic or would disintegrate people or divide people through various mechanisms of corruption and hatred and war. And so I think that it's good to talk about these things, but then it's also equally, if not more important, to talk about the fact that like evil is at work in our country, and it's using the Democrat Party, it's using the Republican Party, it's using the ideas of, I don't know, the far left and the far right. Like, it doesn't care about that stuff. It's just going to use whatever it can to tear us apart.
Yep. No, 100%. And, America was built off of a small group of farmers, right? That overcame the largest empire that ever was, right? A small group of farmers. What was working in them? That was the Logos manifesting through them. And it happens with small groups of people that hold to integrity and truth. And no matter what happens in the face of it, hold to that truth and that integrity and that faith and that trust, and the new will be built from there. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here, and I'm hopeful for it. And yeah, man. So
I can't say it's a surprise, because if you look at the American Revolution, that is what initiated the process to establish our nation. So it's part of the framework, it's part of our ancestry to protest, to riot, to revolt. And so I think it was our greatest strength in that it got this ball rolling for us to be independent. I think there is other ways we could have gone about it, but perhaps we're impatient. And then, so then if you were to look at that, we can't act surprised. It might be that it is ultimately our greatest weakness or our greatest downfall.
Yeah.
Our greatest strength could become our greatest weakness or downfall.
Yeah, definitely was, protesting and whatnot, that, anything that's true is going to be attempted to be captured, and it is, but the truth doesn't change, it just
Mm-hmm.
gets manipulated. Right. And it's, continuing that cultivation of relevance realization. I love the word because it brings so much together. It brings so much, like continuing the cultivation of the open heart. Right. I think that's another synonym for relevance realization. If your heart is pure and open, and your intentions are for the well-being of others, what is the right thing to do will show up at the right time. And I think that that's going to continue to spread. And things are going to appear to get a lot worse this year, right? But you remember that's not real. Like the real.
That's the other thing in the Sermon on the Mount, James, is ask and seek and knock, because you'll receive, you'll find, it will be open to you.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to hold fast to being true during these times. We need to seek the truth, and then we need to hold fast to it and carry it out and not get so distracted by all of the chaos that's happening. It's like, what's the order that I can put my hands to today that if others were to do it, then it would reverberate and we would have a society that is positive and life-giving and good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have a passage right here from Matthew 7:7. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find it. Knock and it will be open to you. And I've had it here always in front of me. And that's it's a very powerful thing, to grok that and to work with that. Right. And that's where prayer, man, prayer is absolutely necessary, to get that right. Whatever that means, is a powerful thing. With that, nothing can beat you or stop you, because you'll persevere. The worst things will be potential energy for your growth, right? Where the worst things could be something to destroy you. If you actually have faith, like really have faith, like, which is hard to do, but it's something you cultivate, through difficulties and challenges. You kind of have your anchor in the world, and whatever happens around you, it whirlwinds you. It might knock you down. You might be anxious and depressed and down about what's happening. But, ultimately, if you have that rock of faith, man, you're good to go. So cool, man. Well, yeah, we could talk for a lot longer, man. I got my kids wrestling back there, but let's continue.
No, that's the end note, man.
Yeah.
Well, just tell me what are things coming up for you in this 2021 as far as the channel or other works that you're putting your hands to?
Yeah. I have some conversations that are coming up. Like, I'm really excited to speak with Andrew McLuhan, who is a wonderful human being. I've been friends with him on Facebook and kind of been engaging with him. We had a chat on the phone a couple of days ago, and I was really excited about that. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to allow whatever comes. Like, I don't have plans. Like, I'm just allowing. I've a lot of people lined up for interviews, trying to get Jordan Hall on, and who else was that? A couple other people, Benjamin and Boyce, were connecting to get on. And, I'm allowing whatever pops up and whatever engagements pop up from networking and connecting with people, to let whatever this thing is emerge. Like, I have no plans really. I have, in terms of monetization, like, I think if you get 1,000 subscribers and you have 4,000 hours or whatnot, I'm close to that, but I don't even I don't want to get pulled into that. Like, if that happens, that's good. I don't want to start making content because, it's a difficult balance. So that's why I'm just trusting and allowing what comes up and using that feeling that we have. Like you said, that didn't sit with me right. I'm trying to work on that and then just let whatever happens. So not really.
Yeah. The spirit of truth guide you along the way.
Yeah.
Are you still going to be doing the book commentary and reading?
Yeah. Yep. I have a couple of, I got a great book here that I started, The Roots of Christian Mysticism.
Oh, cool.
Text from the patristic era. I have about 2 or 3 readings. Check those out. I mean, this is it's like spiritual food. Like, you can, as you're reading it, you can just feel your change. Like, it's all these unpublished and mostly lost texts from the patristic era and commentary on it. Commentary is pretty good, but the actual text, St. Maximus the Confessor, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, and some of the chapters, like it's just a beautiful. I highly recommend it. Check out a couple of the videos where I just read from it, and you'll see kind of what I mean. But again, with those, I don't have like a list of books that I want to read and share. Like I'll before I do a video, I'll actually pray and just like, this is what interests me now, and then I'll just share that. And that's been working because, I'm doing it because I like it and I love it and I'm interested in it and I want to share with people what I like and I love. And if they don't like it, that's, it is what it is, so yeah. But what about you? I know you got a lot of, I've got a lot of irons in the fire, and I'm interested to see where you go and to collaborate with you this next year for sure.
Yeah, no, I hope this is just one of several interactions with you as well. Yeah, so the YouTube channel, a lot of people keep saying like, oh, you got to find the niche, find the riches in the niches. I'm going to go the other direction this year. Mm-hmm. So I'm really going to open it up. 2020 was very like thoughtful and theoretical and conversational. So I'm going to keep all of that going, but also the commentaries on books, the commentary on culture, the theories, the stories, the reading of articles that I'm writing for the Symbolic World blog. I'm going to keep all that going, but I'm going to try to incorporate some more of like we were talking about, the embodiment of the practical element too. So it'd look like maybe doing more of like the film essays too, but also things like how I bake bread, or sharing like some of these parenting practices that are working well for our family and our household, or how to build things. So I'm open to those things as well now this year. I'm also going to be doing I just started a newsletter that I'm really excited about. Every 2 weeks, I'll be sharing just a kind of a hodgepodge of all of the clippings and quotes and ideas and links that are, the newsletter is based kind of like on the cosmology, the ancient cosmology of heaven and earth and time and space, or the center and the margin, where it's not just the philosophy, it's also the practice. It's not just all of the things that we're familiar with. It's also the kind of things that might be scary or controversial or comedic relief, things like that as well.
I love it.
So I'm excited about that. But then also I'm going to continue writing for the Symbolic World blog, and I am trying to connect with some artists as well. And we'll see if we create some networks. I'm curious about social networking at a small scale.
Yes, me too. I'd like to collaborate. Just this came up with you. I'd like to collaborate with you on this, maybe a series of symbolism in parenting, or how to, applied symbolism in parenting. Because I think there's a lot there in terms of the coming together of heaven and earth, and how, that's where truth happens. That's where, that's where it is. Like maybe we can come up with something like that. Symbolism in parenting, something like that. So
I think the topic of parenting is just, it's becoming more and more important today. And I think that you and I having kids around the same age is just all the more better just for each other, just to swap what works, what doesn't, philosophy and practices alike. Definitely. But I think that's also going to shape the conversations I want to have too. Like I have some gardeners that I really look up to, and I want to, just as maybe before the spring solstice comes around, have conversations with people about not just like, obviously how symbolically rich and important the garden is, because that's where it starts, but like, how do we actually sow seeds and grow plants in a way that produces food that we can eat? Not just talk about the symbolic richness of bread, but actually maybe talk with people about who are bakers and actually bake bread. So we're participating in the philosophy and the symbolic richness that we're engaging in.
Yeah, that is symbolism, right? Planting a seed, heaven, right, into the earth, right? Something emerging. That's a truth event. Like a flower blooming is a plant worshiping God, right? The beautiful bloom is how a plant worships. There's this quote is, fish swim, birds fly and humans pray, something like that. I was like, oh, it's, it goes back to, prayer is not what we think it is. It's not what we've been taught. And I don't know what it is, but you know what I'm saying? It's hard to describe, but that's a very, and I talked about this a little bit with JP, talking about like the placebo effect and what are miracles. I think prayer is up there. It's a tool, not a tool. It's a dispensation that we have that that is Christ told us how to pray, right? And we're like, oh yeah, that's how you pray. I'll say those words, but there's a lot more there that I think, I'm going to be digging into to talk about some more.
Mm-hmm.
But
I know Dostoevsky in the Brothers Karamazov said that prayer was education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
prayer is education.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love
and that's
that.
just one element, but yeah, he goes on to explain a little bit further in his book. But
because education is a cultivation of your being, right? But we think education, we think math and science that we learned at school, which is the cultivation of wisdom and of character is what we don't get in schools anymore. If we ever did, we used to get it from church, and church has been unfortunately diminished so much that increasing the different ways we can get wisdom and build character in church, outside of church, and it's not happening in school. So yeah, man, more of that is good.
Yeah, it's like a synthesis of everything.
Yeah,
I guess you could call it as well. It's like, so you take all of the parts of who you are, all of the experiences that you're going through, all of your knowledge, and then you try to synthesize it into a sentence of prayer.
Yeah, beautiful. That's the Logos acting within you, and just, cultivating you, guiding you. So,
and then when you combine that with repentance, then it's revivifying, because repentance is the best practice of cleansing.
Yeah, it's getting rid of the old for the new to come in. Like, I think that's what you do when you get married. You sacrifice part of your identity of who you could have been, right? Your habits that you had, you have to sacrifice those that were part of your identity to become part of a new, more integrated identity with your wife. Right? So you're literally sacrificing, and repenting is breaking off the old, for the new to emerge, which is difficult. And it's hard because that's your identity, or your perceived identity, right? Breaking that off is, for the new to emerge is kind of like, debridement of the skin from a burn, but you got to rub it off. And that's where the faith comes in, man. Because when you're going through that level, you've been burned, and hey, we got to take the old skin off for the new to emerge. It's like so painful, but the only way for that new to emerge is for that pain to happen. And that's where I reread about the saints talking about, repentance and prayer and deep, tears. If you pray and you don't have tears running down, you're not praying. And I'm like, oh,
yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. So, but anyways, man, I got the kiddos in the back here.
Go ahead, man.
Yeah, we should do this very soon again. And I'm going to link to, your channel and your symbolic world content on my, on the description of this video here. And I thank you, man. I appreciate you. And I love you. Thanks so much, man.
Love you too.
Yeah, man.
Look forward to next time.
Yes, sir.